for this next segment, we are staying in the NFL, staying in the NFL world. We're talking about the 18-game season. Now, obviously, it was pretty recently when they expanded to a 17-game season, which in itself was controversial. But you're the NFL, your product makes a ton of money, and on that side, it makes a lot of sense to expand your season even more. Obviously, more games, another week of football equals another week of revenue. Now, the reason we're talking about this now, the headline that's come out, is recently the NFLPA and the NFL have begun, quote, discussions at like a very, very high level. So the direct quote from is the NFLPA director, Lloyd Howell. He said, "We have talked at a very, very, very high level officially with a recognition about this is something we should be talking about. We should really kick the tires and understand what goes into the decision-making process. Where does the 18th game come from? I think the foregone conclusion is, well, you grab it in what otherwise would be preseason and you play it forward, but there are details that need to be fleshed out, economic, health, and safety matters that need to be clear to our members before there's ever an agreement about the 18th game." We've had Roger Goodell talk about, like, it's going to be, like, saying that he's in favor of it, seems inevitable. There's a lot to talk about here, how it'll work, whether we like it or not. I'll just kind of throw it over to you right away, Simon. 18-game season, just gut reaction, yes or no?
Oh, if we're gonna open with that, I won't talk about this quite yet.
Yeah.
But yes or no? Is it gonna happen? Yes. Is it smart? Probably not. Considering that with how injuries and all that, like playing more games in football just like seems like a poor idea, and that's generally the thing that is shared among most players is like, you want me to play an extra game all year? That sounds stupid. Like, we are already playing one extra game than we wanted to back in 2021. Now you're asking for another one. Like, in 4 years, are we going to be playing, like, at that point, 19 games? Right? Is that the conversation we're going to have in 2028? Like, at least to me, the one thing I was going to open with, I'm just going to quickly bring this up because I think it's really funny, is the beginning of that quote is absolutely hilarious. Because they actually made the point to, like, it's just him spinning in circles. We have talked at a very, 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 very high level, superficially, with a recognition of about, yeah, we should be talking about this, and we should be really kicking tires and understand what else goes into that decision making process. Holy shit, that's hilarious that's in the article. Why would you keep that in?
I mean, it is pretty funny. As I was reading that quote, I was kind of like, wow, he's saying a whole lot of nothing here.
I know.
I feel like he should get to...
I was like listening to you say it while reading it on my screen. I was like, you've said a whole lot of nothing, and it goes on for another 2 lines. It's like...
I kind of kept going as I was like, when am I getting to the meat and potatoes of it?
I know.
Yeah, I mean, it is like the core of what he's saying, maybe more
Sure.
succinctly, is interesting. But
no, absolutely. The rest of the quote,
the rest of it.
I started laughing because I didn't see that there's more quote afterwards. I thought that was the quote you were running with, like the whole that entire thing. I just started losing it. I was like, because that's it's such a shit quote. But anyway, yeah, I think at least that's where I sort of landed on it, where it's just player safety wise, it doesn't make any sense. I think even for like the NFL, you're not even being like slightly, like, I don't know, like players were really against having 17 games. I think that's something we have to talk about. Like, remember when that was becoming a thing? It seemed like everyone was against it.
I will say, because it is a players association thing, the players did technically have to pass it, and they did. Out of the player vote, but it passed with a but it was only a 51.5% majority.
Yeah.
And very narrowly passed. There were very many players who were but it did pass.
I guess it does mean more money. I guess everyone likes more money.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. I don't know. It's just like, I guess when you put it like that, more money, at that point, just make it 20. Why are we just doing 18? Let's make it 20 games.
Well,
like, at what point are we just going to keep kicking the ball?
Yeah, I do think 18 is their goal. I would be surprised if they expanded past that. One reason, and that is when you expand to 18, the timing lines up so that the Super Bowl falls on a long weekend. And that I think is the big thing where the NFL, because I feel like that's always been the oh, make the day after Super Bowl Sunday like a holiday, and now they're actually going to get that because in the U.S. it'll be President's Day, here it'll be Family Day. So I
Right.
do think that creates a nice little synergy, um,
I
where you have
guess
that day off,
I
and it
didn't think of
makes.
that.
And I think I think that makes more sense from a fan perspective, but I think also from perspective it makes sense because then you carry the conversation about the Super Bowl more even into the next day. I
Yeah.
think you can take over even more of the weekend. And you also obviously the benefit of the extra week, like we already said. I think that's a big thing. I think that lines up so well that I could see the NFL being hesitant to move that even farther. Although the one thing I would say is if they're talking about taking a preseason game and adding it on, it doesn't work. So
Yes, that's
who
true.
knows where they're going with that. Um,
Or
so yeah,
yeah, or if they take like a preseason off or something to make it work, right? Like, because there was talks about that as well.
yeah,
I think at one point. I think I don't know. That's a very good point. That's actually a really good point because it does immediately take away from like the one reason I really had against it. Just like you're at that point in 2021, they should just add it two. If you're gonna make that argument, right? Like that's kind of where I land on it. Of
yeah.
just like, why are we every
I
five
bet that
years
wouldn't have
meeting?
passed.
What do you say?
I bet that would have been too drastic.
I
Like I
guess.
don't think that would have
But
passed.
like you can't you gotta admit it looks like they're just like now every 5 years just gonna be like, come on guys, one more. Like at what point, like in 2035 are we gonna be having like a 21 game season? Like it's just I don't know. I don't know.
I hope not. I do think there's a point where the players say no, because yes, the injuries do take a toll. And we've seen that the last couple of years. Like think about last year with all the back injuries we've had. Like that's a
True.
big thing.
Yeah.
In terms of wear and tear. The other thing that I would say, and I think it makes a lot of sense from this would be the best case scenario from a player safety perspective, but less so for a fans and league profit perspective, is you add an 18th. No, you would add, I guess, let me math this out in my head. You would add a 19 because I believe you're already at 18 weeks with because every team has a bye.
Right.
You add in a 19th and then have every team play 17 games but have two buys.
Which
That's
would
something that
ruin your
I've heard.
plan.
Like adding, like yeah, um, but no, it wouldn't ruin your plan. It would be because if you stretch like that way, you could still stretch the season out one more week, have it line up with the President's Day weekend, and just have everybody all play 17 games and not expand the games played. I think that
Oh,
is
are
the
you
best
assuming
case
you take a
scenario
preseason
from.
game off?
No, I'm assuming you'd keep everything the same. And then just because you have to expand the season one week to get to that President's Day weekend. So
Yeah.
just instead of adding a game, you just add a week. So then the NFL, like, I guess technically it's the same amount of games. They get an extra week of airtime.
Oh.
But the one bad thing would be is that, I mean, the NFL doesn't see an increase in profit in games because it's the same amount of games. And the quality also dilutes because if teams have two bye
See,
weeks, less teams are going to per week. There's pros and cons to it.
yeah, see what I thought you were saying, and where you lost me. I thought you were making the argument of adding a game and a bye, which I have heard. I haven't heard that
No,
one, which would have them going 1 week over and completely unvalidating. Which I actually thought before this whole President's Day weekend conversation came up. I actually was looking at it more as a. I thought that was the biggest possibility of like the players would probably agree to do it if you give them another bye week, right? Because that
yeah,
way you're basically cool. You're getting another game. You win. The players are getting another game or a week to rest. They win. It's kind of a win-win, right? In a
yeah,
sense. So I think, at least to me, that made the most sense. Now that we're actually talking about it like that, that does blow up their plans. And
yeah.
if I guess you could take,
You could take a preseason,
which
right?
people were
Like I
also
think
mad
that's how you
about.
make that work.
Because and this was a
Yeah.
I don't remember. I feel like it was the Pat McAfee show I saw this on, but I don't remember who said it, so I can't give credit sadly. But it was an NFL player who made a really excellent point about it, who basically said you take away a preseason game, and you are actively taking an opportunity for young players to show that they have a shot in the NFL. Think about all of the players who have given their best in the preseason and made a career after that. You're actively taking away one game to be able to do that. But at the other side of things, when you take away a preseason game and give it to the NFL season, that's a lot more money because not a lot of people tune into preseason games. You got to think about it like that.
I do.
I know, Caleb, but you're special like that. Not everybody not everybody likes to tune in for the preseason games to see Paxton Lynch jump in and throw.
Yeah, I love watching like Sean Mannion against the Broncos. Like that's just great.
Like not everybody tunes in for that, which is fair. On the NFL standpoint, it's needed, but if it disappeared, would the fans care? No. Would it affect business?
No,
not really. Like it
would improve business.
It would, yes.
But the players would hate it.
Absolutely. And hell, I think a lot of the teams would hate it because it's just one less week to scout your own teams, right? Like it's
also one less week to get prepared. I mean, I do think like because especially with practices nowadays being a lot less contact focused, you look at the preseason games and it's like there's an opportunity. The starters obviously are some teams they don't even play them at all. Some teams just play them in quarters, but it is a good way to kind of ramp up. So I do think you lose a little bit of that, and obviously the argument with I do think it would be a thing that the players would hate, but maybe if you balance it out and say we're basically substituting that third preseason game with a bye week, maybe then that balances out. It'll be really interesting because I mean we can speculate on a lot in terms of 15-game season because we haven't really been given any specifics. And I mean, like the long rambling quote that the guy said, there's many ways we can go about it, which I think is really interesting because I think it is inevitable because it's a league motivated by profit and this is going to make it more profit. Simple as that. I think it does leave me feel a little bit jaded knowing that profit's going to probably win out in the game no matter what the player safety concerns or any other concerns.
The way we've been talking about it, it's making me realize, holy fuck, that's exactly what they're going to do, isn't it? Like, they're going to get rid of a preseason game, add a bye in a game. You're fucking the players a little bit, but at least you're giving them one thing they want. And you're going to, at the end of the day, you are still extending the season during the time where it matters the most, during the regular season, leading right into the playoffs. Because you could put that bye anywhere in the year, or you could put it right in between the last game of the season and playoffs if you wanted. That'd be the one other suggestion that I'd possibly make. Sure, you're kind of like
for like all teams.
Yes, as sort of like a last second. That's the other suggestion I'll throw out there, because I feel like players would jump at that in a weird way. Sure, you're kind of.
No, I don't know. I don't know if players would because then you're still playing the extra game and only like half of the league gets.
I guess the bye week.
Right?
Yeah, I guess the bye week becomes 2 weeks, which is a little rough. You could talk about rust at that point, but it's like yeah. Okay,
and
maybe I'll take that back. But like
go away for a first seed,
yeah, no, that's a good point. I'll take that back. But either way, I think just having 2 bye weeks will be huge. I think that is the really big bait for a lot of players. For starters, I think more than anything. A lot of the starters, I think, would love 2 bye weeks, and they'd probably take a bye week over that last preseason game, if you think about it.
Yes, I would agree. Again, I think the biggest concern with the 2 bye week structure is the dilution of, like, I think it'll make it worse for the fan because like red zone is going to be worse. You'll have less games on. Prime time is going to be worse because you'll have less matchups to choose from. Like, you think the primetime matchups are bad now. Imagine what happens when like you have a week where like the Chiefs and Ravens and Niners are all off, and so you have to watch Titans and Patriots on Thursday Night Football. Like, I don't know. Like, I can easily see that happening. So I think
Or you
that's
just
the
make
biggest
sure that they
concern.
don't have the same week off.
Yeah, but you know what I mean, right? Like,
No, I
it's gonna
absolutely
happen.
do. No, that is a
But
good
teams
point.
have 2 bye weeks. Yeah, and it's like, how do you space it out? Because that kind of creates another scheduling thing where will teams have like, do you have to have a certain amount of space between your first and second bye? Will there be some teams who have both buys in the first half of the season? How does that create an unfair advantage or disadvantage, right? I think it creates a lot to consider, which I don't know if we talked about this, but I think they mentioned that the timeline is around 2030 for this 18 game season to take effect, like at least by 2030, just because that's when the collective bargaining agreement runs out.
Right.
Lots of kinks to work out before then, but it's an interesting discussion to have.
No, absolutely. I think it's gonna happen. I haven't really asked you
Yeah.
whether you think it's gonna happen, but I think it'll probably happen at some point between then. I think we've kind of learned that if Roger Goodell wants something, it's probably gonna happen. So I think
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I think whatever they have to do to make it happen is gonna work. I do think that adding another like bye is what makes the most sense. And if we are talking about the presidential weekend, that's what it's called, or day off, whatever it's
President's
called.
Day weekends. Yeah.
I'm not American, but shocker. But I think if we're just talking about that, that most likely means taking a preseason game off and all that. Like, there's a lot of things that could happen. There's a lot of ways they could do it. So I guess we'll just have to see. I guess we'll just have to see which direction they decide to take it, because if they just add one game and that's it, I feel like there's gonna be a lot